Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel Sisko, and I'm the Assistant Project Coordinator of the Rural Health Initiative. The mission of RHI is to engage partners to share ideas and expertise and to support communities in improving health while stimulating a higher level of wellness across the state. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, A Montana Community's Commitment to Raise a Healthier Generation of Children, presented by Mary McCourt.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. Am I on screen now?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, so I want to chat with you for the next 40 minutes or so. And I want to start with how we defined our problem. So in 2008, our health director thought, I wonder what the obesity rate for children is in Missoula County. And Missoula is kind of one of those communities and counties that prides itself on being exceptionally healthy and active, and we don't have food deserts. And so, but we were curious because nationally we knew that this had been identified as a major problem in our culture and our country. And so we started our third grade BMI surveillance project. And every year we were measuring anywhere from 500 to 800 third graders in Missoula County. And the first year that we started this, in the first column here, you can see that we had, it was close to 28% of our kids were above the healthy range. And the orange is the number of kids, so 13.7% of the kids were obese in Missoula County. And I have to say that this was alarming to everyone. This number, this 13.7, it would have been in 1980, according to N. Haynes, it would have been 7%. And in 1970, it would have been 4%. So what this told us was that we had not escaped the childhood obesity, just like people in the South where it's extremely high, but even kids that are in the Midwest living in inner cities. And so we continued our surveillance on third graders, and we continue to do that this year. And then in 2014, we added 7th graders and 10th graders. So I want you to look at this, our latest number. We're very encouraged because we've decreased our obesity rates by 10%, which is actually it isn't 3%, it's about a 30% decrease. We're hoping that number holds because, as you can see, it often will fluctuate. But we're hoping that we keep that at 10 and go even further. But what I think is most interesting here is that these 7th graders here that had an above rate of 29%, those kids were in 3rd grade right here. And so in 3rd grade, they were only at 26.5%. And so it has continued, and we know this nationally, that as kids age, their obesity rates go up. And what we know about 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders is they have more control of the food they're eating outside of the home. And they don't have recess. They're not as active. And so at the same time, we started doing our obesity surveillance projects, and this was not screening. We did not send home any measurements to parents. A child doesn't know what his height or weight is. The teacher doesn't know, the school doesn't know, and the parent doesn't know. We're just looking at population health here, which was an easier sell to the school districts. But at the same time we were doing this, Dr. Gaskell at the University of Montana was looking at how active our Missoula kids are. And he did a study in 2007 with 553 2nd through 12th graders with accelerometers. And he looked at how active kids were in Missoula. And so to meet the health guidelines, a child has to have 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activities on most days. And with no surprise, The elementary school kids were pretty healthy in terms of their physical activity, but what is discouraging, of course, is the high school rate at 11%. Now that is the health guidelines, which is different than the fitness guidelines. So the fitness guidelines is that in any 1 week you have at least 60 minutes of vigorous activity. So I always say that the moderate activity for me is walking the dog on a flat walk, but if I try to walk up to the M in Missoula, that is the vigorous, and I'm huffing and puffing, and my cheeks are red. So that is the difference, and what you can see, even in the elementary, went from 78% to 27%. But what is extremely alarming is that only 2% of our high school students are fit under CDC guidelines for fitness. So this active community really is not that active for kids. That's what we learned. So we know we have obesity rates that are higher than what we want. We know we have less activity. And in Dr. Gaskell's study, he also looked at the connection between normal weight, overweight, and obese, and if they met the health guidelines. And you can see that 49% of the kids in the normal weight range met those health guidelines, 24% in the overweight, and only 10% of kids that are obese were meeting the health guidelines. So that helped us continue to narrow in how we wanted to work with our community. So how did we start? So we had this data, and the Missoula City County Health Department decided to take on obesity, childhood obesity, as an initiative. And then we created a program, it's called the Amanda Story, where we say, how is it that a child that is born, has a healthy birth in Missoula, Montana, ends up obese in 3rd grade? And we went through all the variables that influence that child, that create the groundwork for that child to be obese. And we vetted that story with potential stakeholders. And then we identified major leaders and partners in the community. And I think in each community, no matter if it's a large AA school community or a small C community, there are leaders in your community that you could identify as major partners. Obesity is a concern of many people. We know that it's the big ship in the harbor in terms of how much it's going to cost us to fight obesity. And so people are concerned about that, but it's identifying who can mobilize your community. And in our community, it was interesting because the United Way National and the YMCA National both have childhood obesity initiatives. And the head of our United Way, Susan Hay Patrick, is a powerhouse of a person in our community. And so she is very embedded in the community with other leaders and was able to help us create our leadership team. Then we identified the Let's Move initiative, which is the national movement that Michelle Obama started, as going to be our template for how we were going to communicate with the community and set our objectives. So the purpose of Let's Move Missoula is to create, support, and mobilize projects and partnerships that enhance and build environments for all children and residents. Strategies include education, policy development, advocacy, and environmental change. And we envision healthy kids and appealing healthy options for all residents, no matter where they live, work, play, or go to school. So that is our vision. It's a very broad vision, and I'm telling you it's a very difficult vision. We're near there, but we have made some progress. So our leadership team, we were looking for not your daily program manager type person, but the head of agencies to be on our leadership team. because what we know is that it all eventually has to be policy-driven. Changes in any type of change, you have to have policies that guide that change, implement that change, and hold accountability to that change. So we have both hospitals sit in our leadership team, the chamber, both city and county elected officials, the health department, of course, our largest district in Missoula County, Parks and Rec, the YMCA, United Way, and the University of Montana. And you know, in smaller communities, your leadership team could be very small. It really doesn't matter the size of your leadership team. What it matters is that it represents a broad variety of agencies, and that they are people of importance within their agency that sit at your table. And so the initiative structure, we patterned that after the Let's Move. So the task force, that's our leadership team. We designated a community point person, an agency, and that was me at the time. And the health department was the agency that where we sit. Our tagline is Let's Move Missoula. We had a public launch. It was pretty soft at first, and then measurable objectives. And so that's how we basically structured our initiative. And so when you look at childhood obesity, it's a very complicated situation, and we don't have control over everything that feeds into childhood obesity. The pun not intended. But if you look at this particular model, and I really like this particular model, you see the biologic and genetic factors. I mean, the CDC will even recognize that 5% of all kids will naturally be obese. 5% will be underweight and 5% will be obese. So that piece of the puzzle we have no control over. But the behavioral factors and the personal factors and the family and peer factors, that's where the education piece happens in those three arenas, where we are teaching people this is better food as opposed to this. These are nutrient-dense foods as opposed to calorie-dense foods. This is why physical activity is very important for a healthy lifestyle and healthy weight. So we can control that, impact that through education. And then when you get out to this next circle, food and physical environments, we can impact that through how kids, when they're at school, how that works. When they go to Parks and Rec, what's offered in the vending machine. So wherever we can up here, government and school policies, this is the environment we're trying to create that's always healthy for kids. And then we can move out into the community. Hopefully more community practices. Currently in 3 or 4 of our supermarkets, there is a basket of fresh fruit that kids under the age of 12 can help themselves to, and no longer can they get cookies in the bakery department. So that's where you see a community policy and practice that helps our work. And then this is a piece that I am a strong believer in because I believe in social marketing, and you can look at all of the successful changes, tobacco use, car seats, seat belts, all of those have had strong media advertising and promotion. We haven't had the money to put into that yet, but it's on our agenda. And then the cultural factors. And in Montana, it's interesting. We don't live in the South where the cultural factors of the types of food they eat is highly caloric. So that piece isn't as important. I think Native Americans that are working in our communities and on their reservations, that piece applies more to them. If we're looking at the outside circle, so this is where you really change the culture when these things happen. Food production, other than our farm to market and farm to school programs and the SNAP programs at our food, at our summer food, well, I can't remember the word, but we don't have a lot of control over the food production. But in terms of governmental, school, and organizational policies, that's the piece of the puzzle that we have our eye on. How can we continue to make schools healthier and government buildings healthier? The economic influences, if overnight we could make every household in Missoula have a living wage and lower rent and cheaper food, we would not have this obesity crisis. Unfortunately, overnight we can't make that change. And we know that Montana is an extremely poor state with a lot of single parents trying to raise children on very limited budgets. So this is a major factor. But if we can work in the areas that we can be successful in, we can help these children. Excuse me. So our public launch was in 2009 when we borrowed, thank you to Bozeman, their model for the Unplug and Play Week. And this was a very soft launch. Basically what we did is we created an insert into the Missoulian, and we put this information about the kickoff event, and then we put all the free and low-cost activities that parents can do during the week and take their kids to where the kids are not sitting in front of screens. And so Unplug and Play is a national event, and we just tailor-made it to our community. The kickoff event that we held that first year was in McCormick Park, and we had things from climbing walls to obstacle courses. We had Grizzly players, basketball, both girls and Lady Grizz and boys, or guys come. We had about 150 people show up. Last year, our Unplug and Play event had about 1,000 people show up. So it's free, and we know that that speaks to low-income families that can't pay to play. Last year, we had about 21 different activities for the kids, and we had fresh fruits and vegetables that were free. And so it's just the beginning. One of our plans this year is to take this issue of Unplug and Play and using it as a way to reach parents throughout the year with Unplug and Play events at schools where we would have a night of a healthy meal and a play activity for families. We don't have that off the ground, but that's one of our next ideas. So we had that soft launch, and then it took us a couple years to mobilize, to figure out, okay, we know where we want to go, but how do we convince the community that we need strong partnerships? So in the fall of 2012, we had our first summit. We called it the Summit to Prevent Childhood Obesity. I cannot remember where we got the money, but somehow we got that. Well, first of all, we charged, but we also had some money to support this. And we brought in national experts. Mark Fenton is a national expert on what does your community look like? Are there streets? Is there lighting? Are there parks nearby? Is it safe? Are there safe communities? If not, this is what you need to do. So we brought Mark in. And then we brought Darla Castelli in from the University of Texas, Austin. And this might have been the most important guest we invited, because Darla was able to show us that if you increase physical activity turns little brains on. And brains that are turned on are going to be better learners when they're sitting in their desks. So this really kind of changed really kind of mobilized our movement. We brought Dr. Kelly Rice in from Oregon. Let's Move National has guidelines for what's a healthy child care, because we know currently that about 1 in 4 kids at the age of 5 are already overweight. So if we can change child care so that kids, once they start school, are at least in the normal weight range, then we are going to get a leg up. The earlier, the better. And then we brought Dr. Kathy Breeden in to talk about what nutrient-dense food is, and talk to a lot of registered dietitians and food service that provide food in the schools. We had about 227 attendees from both Missoula and around the state. And then we had 15 priority action items that went back to the leadership team. Now, in your communities, you don't have to do this to make this all work, but this is how we did it, and we had the money to do it, so that made a difference, and we had the venue to do it. But we can share all of their information with any community, and you can have an open house and show them, present what they presented to our community. So it isn't that you have to recreate any of this. So implementing the action steps, then we had we decided to have 2 more summits, one specifically for physical activity policies and programs, and we brought Dr. Gaskell from the U, Perpetual Motion, Prepared to Learn, and we brought Dr. Castelli back again. And what was really great is that our largest school district, the one inside our city limits, we had so convinced them that they paid for three teachers from each school building to attend this summit, because the administration really understood now that if we could get kids more active during the school day, that we are going to see some improved behavior and academic success. So when we think about what the template is, what the best practice is for physical activity during the school day, this is the recipe that we are striving towards. It would be active transportation, where you walk or bike to school. When you get to school, there's an active recess on the playground, and we just started that this year. And you have brain breaks, so your teacher says, oh, we've been sitting for 40 minutes, let's get up, and I'm going to talk about this more next week. And then you have an active recess, and an active recess includes equipment and volunteers. And then you have any physical activity during the day for kids that don't have recess. For older kids, what do? We still haven't figured that out. And then after-school opportunities. If the school supports in any way programming after school, it is our hope that each one of those programs would offer physical activity and a nutritious, smart snack compliant snack. Okay, so then we had the physical activity, then we had food for fuel and learning, and Katie Bark, who I think is on this call. Thank you, Katie, for all your help. Katie presented Schools Step Up to the Plate to Fuel Smart Minds and Healthy Bodies. And then we brought in Jessica Black from the Pew Charitable, Growing Healthier Generations. And these were the breakout sessions, and this was sort of leading up to our Smart Snack Compliance. So when you think about food, what are the issues with food for kids during the school day? Healthy classroom rewards and snacks for hungry students. So we know that there are kids that are underweight or kids that are overweight but undernourished. So we need to keep that in mind. But are teachers using candy bars or jawbreakers for rewards or whatever? So that's our next challenge, and we'll talk about that 2 weeks from today. And then healthy vending options, making sure those vending machines are Smart Snack compliance, and that the fundraising is Smart Snack compliance, and that classroom celebrations, that parents are discouraged from bringing in the Costco muffin or the Costco cupcake. And then the off-campus lunch opportunities. We have very little control over that, but that would be down the road when our whole community gets energized about this. So one of the things that I know that BJ, thank you BJ for your help in setting this up. We talked about how our Let's Move strategic plan is interwoven with our CHIP plan for the health department. And so we looked always at evidence-based strategies that can be measured. So the infrastructure, that's the built environment, the activities, education, and awareness, marketing, and events. And so for those of you working on your CHIP plan, when you have access to my PowerPoint, you can go ahead and just click onto this and go into our CHIP. But I just want to take a look and show you how we set this up. So our goal is to reduce childhood obesity by 10% from 13%, that was our measurement in 2008 and 9, to 11.7. So we're either there or we're close to being there, which we're tickled about, and of course we know that childhood obesity is flattening out to a certain degree. And then these are our strategies. And then we want to look at our objective. Missoula County Schools will have school wellness policies in place. So in Missoula County, there are 13 school districts. We have one really big district that makes up about 50% of all the students. And then we have 12. We have 11 K through 8s, and Frenchtown is a K through 12. So we have several school districts. So we're hoping by June 2018 that they all have school wellness policies. And what we know is the USDA has said you have to have school wellness policies, but until recently there really hasn't been a lot of push for those councils to be advocates and to really work on policies. And then objective 2, increase access to the healthy built environment. So this increase the number of children who have access to parks or open spaces within a half a mile of their residence, and improved equipment, facilities, and all abilities equipment, so that all kids in 11 neighborhoods and locations, so that all kids have the ability to use their parks nearby. Our other objective is to increase community and home gardens. We're just going to get started on this. I mean, we have a great community, the Extension Service and Garden City Harvest, but we're going to be working on some new school gardens down the road, so we're kind of working on that. And then this strategy number 2 under this is the healthcare providers, this objective down here. This has been really hard for us to get off the ground. There's a great program called 5210, and what it is an educational piece for healthcare providers to educate parents on what is the recipe. And the recipe is 5 fruits and vegetables a day, no more than 2 hours of educational time, 1 hour of activity, moderate to vigorous, and 0 sweetened drinks. But trying to educate our pediatricians and have educate parents, that's been a challenge for us, and I can't say we're just still talking about that. So examples of policies. So this is under review. We're still not there. We approved our long-range transportation plan, so to promote community health and social equity. So right now we have free bus service in Missoula, which is great. We are working on our sidewalks so that they're safe and shoveled and all those sorts of things. And then this is the workplace, where so the Missoula County now has standards for what can be in our vending machines. And we really had to fight, even in the health department, to get candy bars out of our vending machines. So we're talking about cultural change, as you all know. Our culture has slipped into a culture of high sweet, high fat, high salt foods, and little activity. And so we're trying to change that so that these kids that are growing up now will live as long or not longer than their parents. Beginning the work in the schools, the majority of the work has been done with Missoula County Public Schools and Hellgate Elementary because they have active school wellness councils. One of the things that I learned the hard way is that you need to know how to approach your school and where you can fit in. You know, the schools are always having people knocking at their door saying, we need access to kids, all the kids, and so will you do this, that, or the other thing? And it's really hard on schools. I mean, we pay our schools, we support our schools to educate our children, but what we know is that we expect the school environment to help raise our kids at this point. And so we need to be gentle when we're talking to the schools, and we need to have a plan. And this is how the framework that we're using. So here, daily physical activity and quality nutrition. And so what plays into that? What's happening before and after school? The staff involvement. What's happening during school? What's happening in the family and community engagement? Physical and health education, how, having high standards there. So improving all of this, this first circle in the purple. Then we go into the facilitators and who helps us. Well, they have to have the disposition. They have to want to do this. They have to have the knowledge. They have to know what the safety is going to be, where the resources and what the skills. And then the leaders in a school. So a supportive administration. My coworker Lisa Biskevich and I visited Great Falls District, and we learned so much from their school wellness team and their superintendent, because we found out that they have a champion, and their champion is their superintendent. She wants their schools to be as healthy as possible. She gets it. And so getting that supportive help from the administration is vital. And then you identify champions, and champions can do a lot within the school. And you really wanted that institution, if you want that institution to become healthier, it can't be just pressure from the outside. The schools have to understand why this is important to them and why it helps kids become better learners. So the strategies that have worked. So we constantly look to evidence-based. So CDC and the Institute of Medicine both recommend that youth have 60-plus minutes of daily to moderate vigorous activity for health and improved learning. And we both know, we all know that the USDA guidelines for school wellness councils and Smart Snack compliance is evidence-based. And I'll have to say, in terms of the physical activity, it was this slide that we showed, this particular slide here that we showed teachers and administrators. So Dr. Castelli, this is a composite of 20 students' brains taking the same test. These are the kids that were sitting quietly waiting for the test to begin. And this is the composite of the brains of those 20 students after 20 minutes of working. And these kids had an 18% higher score on that particular test. And so what I say to teachers, and what we know is, it's anywhere from 15% to 35% increase. The more fit the kid is, the chances of that child having higher test scores increases. And so we'll talk about that more next week. But I have to say that sometimes it just took, in fact, it literally took showing this slide to one school administrator that has made the world of difference in us being able to convince the teachers on how to get more physical activity during the school day. So how we've worked in the school, in Missoula there's another big initiative, and a lot of communities have it, and it's the Graduation Matters initiative, and they have a student wellness council. And so it is broken down into these 4 pillars. And so we're working with the physical activity team and the nutrition team. And that's where we've been able to really do our best work. Now, one of the things that most public health folks know is that any health issue follows poverty. And so I want you to look at some of our obesity rates. So this is last year. This is the 3 schools in the poorest neighborhoods of Missoula. So there's 9 in Missoula, in the city limits, there's 9 elementary schools. 32% of the kids were above their healthy weight range, and 17% were obese. If you go down to the other 6 schools, 22% were above healthy, and 10% were obese. And the difference between 17% and 10% is not 7%. It's 70%. In other words, of all the kids in Missoula, of all the 3rd graders in Missoula that are obese, 70% of them attend the 3 schools in the poorest neighborhoods. And so we're really focusing on that population with our programming. So we know it's about changing environments. And so the schools, the community, media, healthcare, early childhood businesses, that's where we are hoping to impact. That's our bigger look. We have these partnerships, Graduation Matters. We have the Eat Smart Coalition, the Active Kids Coalition, and we have affiliates that belong to Let's Move. So what we know is that any opportunity for kids to have physical activity is going to improve their health, and that venues are positioned to influence the availability, school and public, healthier foods, and help with increased consumption of healthy foods. So one of the great things that my coworker did this year is create a policy map. And I think we do have time to look at this. So if we go to our policy map and we go, can you see this? Amy or Ray?
Can
you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So if we go to our policy map and we look at childhood obesity, we get our numbers. And then we go into poverty status, and if we look at one adult with children, and we zero in, let's get in here, no, opposite way, we can actually, I hope I can maneuver this correctly, we can actually get into neighborhoods, and we can see where the poor kids that are obese live. They live on the north and west side. They live on the what we call the River Road and the Franklin to the Fort. So that's this mapping that we've done. This not only helps us understand it and go to City Council and say, you know, instead of building new sidewalks, and we can get into where all of this stuff is on here, where there's instead of building sidewalks where there's already sidewalks, let's look at these neighborhoods where there's the most obese children or the most obese adults that are living in poverty. I mean, you can use these maps. It's an incredible tool. And I have to say that this is how you get grants in Montana. We know that Montana is a poor state. And we know that other people don't think of Montana as a poor state because poverty hides in Montana. We don't have these big populations of inner city people living in poverty. We have little pockets. And so once you can show where the pockets are and the rate of poverty, you're more likely to be able to get some grants. So we continue our expansion of looking at 3rd, 7th, and 10th grade of evaluating those obesity rates. And now, next week, we're going to talk about academic and behavior data that we collected from teachers. Okay. So we have affiliates. Community partners can be affiliates, and we have guidelines for affiliates. We've done brain break teacher evaluation. There's been a grant written through DPHHS, thank you, to hire the school wellness coordinator, which is moi. And I think most importantly, we received the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation recently to invest health. And this is where this map making has really helped because we're zeroing in on with the Robert Wood Johnson money, we're zeroing in on those low-wealth neighborhoods. If you were to stop the normal person downtown in Missoula and say, do you know where poor people live in Missoula? The majority of people say there really aren't any poor people in Missoula. And that, of course, we know is not true. We've received some awards from the Let's Move, and I would really encourage all of you to become Let's Move City and Counties. It's a wealth of information. And we received these awards, which, you know, some of them are kind of rinky-dink, but we got to go to D.C. and meet Michelle Obama, so I was happy about that. But it's a great way then to say to your community and to get some media on this issue. So that's great. So we're going to have hopefully continued funding. We completed the health map. In those 3 neighborhoods that I was talking about that was on the health map, we have now completed a survey because we know in accreditation, one of the things in accreditation is don't assume you know what people want to improve their health. You have to ask them. And so we just completed, I think we got 800 survey results back. We are working on a new way to reach child care providers with our Let's Move Child Care. The city and county are building a trail from Lolo to Bonner. And so when that trail gets finished, you'll be able to ride from Bonner to Hamilton, which is going to be an incredible biking and walking trail. And then prescription drugs, Walk with a Doc program. We know in other communities that if doctors prescribe mostly for cardiac, but it could be for obese patients or people with diabetes, if they prescribe, you need to walk a half a mile. You have to have a trail that's marked so people who aren't used to walking know what half a mile is. And Walk with a Doc is where doctors in Missoula are now saying, yes, we will tell our patients to show up and we will walk with them. So that's on the thing. And so what we know is that 1 in 4 third graders are overweight or obese, and we want to change that. So this is my contact information. I would be happy, I'm very happy to visit with you on the phone, or you can come visit however you want to do that. And so I don't know how to get where I'm supposed to be at for questions.
I can unmute everyone, then everyone can ask questions. How's that sound?
Okay.
Just so everyone knows, you're all unmuted now, so you can ask any questions you have for Mary.
Is there a recording of this that will be available for people who weren't able to sit in on this?
I don't know the answer. Is there a recording?
Yes, there is. We've been recording the entire presentation, and we'll also put it on our website, and we can send out an email when that's ready.
Awesome.
I think I would like to ask a question if there's people still listening. Is anyone else doing BMI surveillance that's on the line? Okay, then.
We have a question in the chat box if you're ready, Mary.
I am ready.
Okay, the question is, can you explain further about the timeline and process for the mapping?
Okay, the mapping, yes. The mapping was a very big project. And so we worked with a mapping business in town, but I think we also worked with Policy Map, and my coworker did most of the mapping work. But if the person that's interested in that would contact me, I will get her in touch with my coworker, and she can explain the whole process. The mapping is so vital from my perspective. I mean, you can map tobacco use, you can map mental illness, you can map, let me go to the map again here. Go down to the map. So, if you go to our map and you want to go to health statistics, you can go to adult obesity, childhood obesity, diabetes, poor mental health days, which is on the BRFA, that's what the question is. So we use BRFA data. And then you could do poverty. You can do deep poverty. Let's see what the other statistics are. Okay, so you can do all of those things and then zero in on, it's the zeroing in, I have to apologize. I don't zero in well. Wait a minute, there we go. Where's Missoula? Okay. Well, I know Missoula's somewhere. Well, anyway, you can you can find out where all of this, where transportation, fitness, activity. You work with who's ever building your map to put in what particular interest you might have. So it could be tobacco use, it could be suicides, it could be a variety of things.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
This one says, since eating breakfast is linked to better academic performance, better behavior, and healthy weight, are schools expanding their breakfast participation rates?
Yes, and so we'll discuss that in the 2 weeks from today, but I'll answer that question. So what we're really pushing, we know that breakfast is vital, and we know that the best practice is breakfast in the classroom. And so currently we have within the city limits, we have of the 4 lowest wealth schools, 3 of them have breakfast in the classroom. We're pushing to increase that to all of the elementary schools where there's breakfast in the classroom. And for those schools that are eligible for breakfast for all, which keeps increasing every year because the poverty rate keeps going up, we're really that's part of our nutrition objective for the next school year. And so if we were to talk about what's the best health day, what's the formula for the best health day, it would be active transportation to and from school, active recess on the playground, breakfast in the classroom, only healthy Smart Snack compliance food ever allowed in the classroom, brain breaks, high participation in the school lunch program, brain breaks in the afternoon, and then healthy snacks if there's an after-school program, and physical activity. So that's where we're going. We're actually putting on a PIR day for teachers called Sugar on the Brain. And we just put together that program, and that might be something we would want to do for you folks down the road through this venue, is to take a look at how do you convince teachers that sugar is not what you want to be introducing to your kids for their learning environment. But breakfast is, we know, vital. And once we started our morning move program, our active recess on the playground, so if you have a kid that comes to school and the choice is going into the lunchroom and having breakfast or playing outside with University of Montana volunteers, we know that that isn't good because the kid is going to want to be out playing. So we are pushing forward on breakfast in the classroom. And we're also having a registered dietitian looking at our school breakfast and trying to get them healthier.
There's another question in the chat box.
Uh-huh.
Are you involved with the 150 Minutes project that is being piloted in some elementary schools in Montana? It provides students with 30 minutes of physical activity per day.
You know, sitting on our wellness committee is a representative from the Montana Heart Association that is, I believe, the leader in the 150-minute project. We would love to see that happen. It's not happening in Missoula yet, and I don't know when it is going to become a push for us because we've been told stay away from. So the 150 minutes isn't just PE time. So our brain break activities and our active recesses and our morning move program would all fit into that 150 minutes. But as I understand it through the Heart Association, their goal would be 30 minutes of PE a day, which would be stupendous. But we are supporting that, but we're not, none of the schools in Missoula County have signed up that I'm aware of for that program yet. But we would be completely supportive of that.
Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you so much, Mary.
Well, thank you, and I would encourage people to tune in next Wednesday and the following Wednesday because it'll be more specific on school policies.
Okay, thank you so much again, and please take our survey.